Well, you know how it is. You decide to start your Eurovision fan channel on Monday, and then on Tuesday, the EBU just drops one of its biggest announcements in 70 years all at once. So you drop everything you had planned and you decide, hey, let's talk about the Eurovision Song Contest Asia. It's been a real logistics mess trying to get it off the ground, but it's here. The Eurovision Song Contest Asia 2026 will take place in Bangkok, Thailand, with at least 10 countries competing. First reactions, this is incredible news. Like, I am incredibly excited for this. Not the least of which is the incredibly smart decision that's been made to put Eurovision Asia almost exactly 6 months after regular Eurovision. And as we all know, Eurovision is in May, national finals start as early as December. That's a 6-month lead up. And as soon as the May contest ends, I assume we'll start getting rumblings of what's going to happen with the Asia contest. Songs will start getting selected. Hey, there's twice as much Eurovision. I'm not complaining. More importantly, I think this is just really fun. You know what? I watch Eurovision because I love experiencing other cultures. I haven't traveled around Europe that much. I've done a little bit, nowhere near as much as I should or want to, but now I get to experience a whole other suite of cultures, backgrounds, music styles, personalities, things that I just wouldn't encounter in my day-to-day media diet through Eurovision Asia, and I'm sure there's many, many other people who feel exactly the same way. And I don't want to hop on it, but it's kind of a theme of this channel that when things suck in the larger, wider world, one of the things that I always look for is the moments and the places where people are coming together and sharing community. That's why I want to make this channel such a positive space for people to hang out in, and I think Eurovision Asia can do just that. Everything, I guess, that we know so far, unless it's been made official by the EBU, is kind of subject to change. We think we know a lot of details, but they might turn out to be wrong, or adjustments might have to be made. I work in production. I've produced live events and concerts and things like that before, and things always go a little bit sideways. You're never exactly where you think you're going to land, which is why I think it's so smart that the EBU at this stage has limited us to 10 participating nations. I'm going to read off the list here, because again, I didn't write a script, I'm just winging it. The 10 countries that have been announced to participate so far are Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Nepal, Philippines, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. Brilliant. So if you weren't aware, there was sort of a rival-ish to Eurovision launched last year called Intervision. That's already happened. I haven't watched anything about it. Maybe we'll do a video on it at some point. But it was kind of a mess from what I've heard. A whole lot of countries there, and I think starting small makes a lot of sense. You want to get the first edition under your belt, so at least 10 countries will know what it takes to participate and what that looks like, how the voting plays out, all that sort of thing, and just get some familiarity with the process. Once you know what you're doing, once you've done it once, it's a lot easier to keep doing it. Something else I think is really interesting is that it's alleged 9 out of these 10 countries, it's almost confirmed, will be selecting their songs through national finals. Now, there's 2 ways songs get to Eurovision. There's national finals or there's internal selections. And I kind of like the national finals. It's a really open-handed, democratic way of saying, hey, we're trying this new thing. We want your country to represent itself on this massive international stage. And we want you to choose who it's going to be. We want you to pick who you're going to represent for yourself. And that's just sweet. Of course, national finals are traditionally exponentially more expensive for broadcasters to put on than just sort of picking an artist and a song from a bunch of submissions. But here's hoping that all of the broadcasters that are participating really understand, exactly what's needed. A national final is not dissimilar from other singing style competitions. Obviously, some of them we see a really high level of production, Eurovision level of production in the case of things like UMK in Finland, but they don't necessarily need to be that. I would really hope that the EBU is actually allowing these 10 nations to tap into some of the experience that the European broadcasters have gotten from participating in Eurovision over a long period of time, that there can be some sort of knowledge sharing behind the scenes, that we can help guide people through this process, because it does have the potential to be a bit unwieldy, a bit expensive, and that can really sour people on participation. But a clever thing the EBU has done to kind of offset that is that this competition allegedly It's not limited to public broadcasters. Private broadcasters can participate. That's important because it allows for different funding opportunities. Most national and public broadcasters are, well, almost by definition, funded by taxpayer dollars. And there's inevitably, if you live in certain countries, the yearly tread out of tabloid press going, why are we spending so much money on this? It's not worth it. It's, you know, just people raining on parades. It's not a great vibe. But private allows for perhaps more sponsorships. I don't know, I haven't read the contracts with the EBU, but I would assume it allows for a little more leeway than maybe traditionally has been experienced in the, now I guess we'll refer to it as the European version of the Eurovision Song Contest. God, that felt weird. They have said that they may announce more countries in the lead up to the contest. It wouldn't surprise me if there were a few more that jumped on board. Weirdly, Australia would be very eligible to participate in Eurovision Asia. And in fact, SBS, the broadcaster in Australia, had attempted to set up a version of Eurovision Asia, back in the 2010s. It fell through, as so many of these attempts did, but there have been people in Australia thinking about it for a pretty long time. Not only do the time zones work out a little bit better. Traditionally, the grand final airs at like 5 a.m. in Australia. I remember waking up early for it. So it would be a little bit better there. There's a potential that Australia could even host, I guess. But SBS has come out and said that they're not keen to participate at the moment. I do wonder if either ABC, the other national public broadcaster from Australia, might jump in to fill that gap, or potentially one of the 3 commercial networks, which are 7, 9, and 10. Yeah, they didn't get too crazy when they were naming TV channels in Australia. But there's a potential there that I guess SBS could send people to Europe and one of the other broadcasters could send people to the Asian competition. I would say it's reasonably okay to assume that Australia's musical tastes align more with Europe than they do with Asia, but that's really a bit of a stretch. Australia has a huge immigrant population from Asian countries, and no doubt they bring all of their influences and aesthetics there. I think there are definitely people in Australia who would be delighted to represent the more Asian side and the Asian-influenced Australian music scene at an international competition like this. So I hope that there's at least discussions going on back in Oz over that. But it would be a weird quirk to, after, not fighting tooth and nail, but after getting invited to participate in Europe, that they would also compete in Asia and get 2 bites at the apple. I just think it's fun. It's not a thing Australia usually does. It's also worth noting that the population of Asia is a whole lot higher than the population of Europe. So in terms of the cultural impact, if these Asian countries take to it the way that Europe has taken to Eurovision, this could really explode and kind of even become something bigger, at least numbers-wise, than we've seen for Eurovision in Europe before. Obviously, there's some massive players in Asia that haven't yet signed up to compete. Indonesia is a big one, China, Japan, notably absent, but they do have South Korea, and that's a very interesting, almost sort of, I don't know why I would consider it more Western than others. I think just for their huge outsized influence on the Western music scene. If you're unfamiliar, the American Song Contest in 2022 was won by an act representing Oklahoma, of all things, that was heavily K-pop inspired, and I just think that's kind of neat. But where was I? Oh, okay, growth. So yeah, if more countries come on board, we could get Eurovision in front of way more eyeballs than have maybe ever seen a contest before. Maybe it'll happen right out of the gate, maybe it'll take a few years to build up that kind of reputation and cultural cachet and that buy-in from populations, but you never know. Another thing that I've heard, and I couldn't find it in an official release just yet, but I got it kind of filtered to me through some other YouTube-based Eurovision news sources, was the fact that because this is a new competition, there might be some new approaches being taken, including getting rid of the European tradition of having the winning nation host. Obviously, that's tradition, it can be broken. It has been broken in the past, notably with Ukraine in 2022. It was not considered a good idea for the contest to take place in Ukraine in 2023, so the runners-up that year, UK, hosted it instead on their behalf. It was very sweet. It was actually a really nice, really lovely vibe to that Eurovision. I really enjoyed it. And as well, if Australia ever won, they're not flying everyone to Australia. I don't know what the process was in place. I remember at some point hearing, and this is maybe just wild speculation because I haven't pulled up a source for this, but there was maybe an arrangement that if Australia won, they could pass the baton to someone like Iceland. More likely than not, it would have been the BBC, or given what happened with Ukraine and the UK, it would go to the second place, or perhaps one of the other big five, now big four. I'm getting distracted. If they avoid that system in Asia, and they move to more of like a bid-based system where countries can put up their hands and say, hey, we would love to host this year, this is what it would look like, this is what we'd invest, this is what we'd do, you would avoid some of the commentary that has come out in Europe before where countries have been criticized for like tanking some of their acts or selecting some acts to ensure that they don't win because they don't want the cost of hosting Eurovision. I think this is all like urban legends and completely like things you hear through the grapevine that aren't true or provably true. I mean, how would you know unless you're in boardrooms where those decisions are being made? But yeah, I think it's a much cleaner system. I think it allows for countries who don't have a lot of resources to invest in the competition where it makes the most sense for them and not have to freak out and worry about winning and then suddenly, oh dear God, how are we going to find all this money to host something as complex as a Eurovision-like competition? And I say Eurovision-like only because, you know, we haven't seen it. They are keeping the 6 people on stage rule, which is smart. The American Song Contest didn't have that restriction. I've only really seen the winning performance, but it had like 20 people on the stage. And that makes sense when you've got all the resources in the world to throw at something. But with Eurovision, it just gets trickier, right? Like one of the big expenses for Eurovision is if you're sending 1 singer and 5 dancers, that's 6 plane tickets. Take Australia, I'm always going to use Australia as an example. 6 plane tickets from Australia to Europe, and then 6 hotel rooms for however long you are. If you're drawn in the first semi-final, that's a few days extra. And then all of the props you have to get there or manufacture in Europe. It's just a logistical nightmare, and keeping the number of participants down goes a long way to ensuring that access to the competition is kind of as open as they can make it. I think that's all the thoughts I have right at this very moment about Eurovision Asia. Obviously, I am overwhelmingly excited. Like, I truly cannot wait to watch the Bangkok final. And I just want to end on the fact that, like, I don't think I've ever listened to a Nepalese song. Like maybe in the background of a movie or something. I've listened to music from Thailand. I know some songs out of Vietnam and Malaysia. Bangladesh obviously is going to have like a heavy Bollywood influence, but that almost, I feel like saying that does a disservice to the fact that Bangladesh has its own distinct and unique culture aside from India, which is the whole point of it being a different country. But what's a song from Bhutan sound like? What's the difference between a Lao approach to music and a Cambodian approach to music? Like, I don't know, and I can't wait to listen to a lot of national final music to find out. Are you as excited for Eurovision Asia as I am? I would love to know what you think about the contest. Put it in the comments, do the like and subscribe thing. Look, no one's here at the moment. This is probably gonna be the first real video that goes up on my channel, and if it happens to get in front of you because of the algorithm, I'd be delighted if you at least gave me a shot and stuck around for a couple of these things to see if you like hanging out. My name's Scott, this is ESC Canuck. I'll see you on the next video. Co-host Jonas is on duty today. Yes, buddy.